If you have specific questions about parasites and chickens, not just parasites in general, but parasites and chickens, that's what we're talking about today. Hi, how are you?
Doing well. How are you today?
I'm doing okay. I was just out in my garage working on a quail hutch.
I've seen that come through. How are the quail doing?
They're actually doing really well. I got 2 eggs so far, and yeah, got to figure out what to do with these males. But let's see. I've got some people in the comments here. Tell us, if you're here, tell us where you're from and how many chickens you have. And in a second here, we'll get to specific questions, but we're going to be talking all about parasites today. So internal and external parasites. And my dog is whining at the door, so I'm going to let him in real quick.
The quail. Well, before we get started, it's an interesting one there. I was working on a project. There's quail get an eye parasite actually in West Texas, and it's having a terrible impact on like the wild quail population. So there's
Oh, really?
study going on to help control that parasite.
That's interesting. Hi, buddy. All right, so we got Florida, Ohio, Washington State, Southern California. Hey guys, someone has 10 chickens. The other day I was going live, we were talking about, or we were watching a chick hatch, and I asked everybody to put who has the most chickens in the comments, and I think the person that won had over 100.
A lot.
That's a lot, yeah. Getting close over here. All right, so do you want to start? Do you want me to start with questions? How do you want to do it?
Yeah, let's dive right in. But you can ask some questions, and then we'll cover those. And then if we skip over something important, I'll fill in the blanks.
Okay, that sounds good. So I put in my stories the other day, I said, if you have questions about parasites, let us know. And there were a few that were like repeated questions. So I thought we would get started with those. The first one, my dog is being very needy. He wants to be on the screen. The first one was, should I treat my chickens preemptively for worms or wait until the parasites appear? And I know I've seen both opinions online, but I'll let you go ahead and answer that question. Buddy, down.
Yeah, sure. So, if you follow me at all, you'll always hear me say, use the data, right? So the best tool we can have is running a fecal flow test, and you report on those before we talk about them. So that's like the gold standard, right? Is just take a fecal sample. Any veterinarian can really run those. It'd be the same process for a dog or cat or any other animal. So again, with that information, then you can say, well, I have a burden or I don't, right? Without that information, deworming, I think a regular deworming based on the life cycle. So as we get into these worms later, as we talk, usually they're around 30 days, just a round number across the board, roundworms and some of these others that we worry about. Mm-hmm. So based on that and how long it takes for that burden to build up, about every 3 months, so every season is not a bad idea to implement a prophylactic sort of deworming program. So that would be my suggestion, and that's mainly based on when you see worms, gross worms, and the infestation is pretty severe. So I've got a slide. I wish we could share some things on here, but it's not very easy. But if you think about a pyramid, like 4 levels of the pyramid, and the very tip top, which is about 10, and that pyramid represents the population of worms, right? From adults that you can see to the various larval stages. And the very tip of that pyramid are actually the gross worms that you can see. So there's a huge burden of worms that you can't see, right? Those are the larval stages. They're migrating through the tissues in some cases and causing the inflammation and damage to the intestinal tract that really hurts the birds in terms of nutrient absorption. So yeah, if you're waiting until you see worms in the droppings, you've got a bigger problem. So, and you can't see many of the worms that we're going to talk about today. So like tracheal worms, right? For example, Syngamous trachea, you can't see that worm. Cecal worms are so small you'll never see them, and they can carry blackhead, right? So a significant disease in turkeys for sure. It can affect chickens too. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay, so how often would you suggest a fecal flow test? Just when you see chickens with, weird symptoms, or would you do it yearly? How often would you do one?
Yeah, I think about 6 months to a year. It depends. Okay. Like you get the first one, right? And then you've got a baseline. So if you don't find anything there, then maybe every year, just stay on top of it. Obviously, if you're bringing in birds to your flock from outside, you don't have a true closed flock, which most people in the backyard setting really don't. That's another risk factor, right? That you could bring birds in potentially that were carrying something. And that's another thing to mention too, is that if you do bring birds in, especially on a regular basis, it's a good idea to, obviously you want to quarantine those birds, but in that quarantine, it's not a bad idea to deworm them just to make sure you're not introducing some sort of parasitic burden to the rest of the flock.
Yeah. Somebody said, what kind of dewormer? And I think you want to talk a little bit about, I know you know a lot about Aquasol, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Right. So if we look at like FDA approved products and products that are specifically labeled for poultry, Safe-Guard Aquasol is really the only one labeled for poultry on the market. It treats roundworms, so it's labeled for cecal worms and roundworms, and it's a very good, very safe product. Unfortunately, I hear cases all the time of people way overdosing it. It's very concentrated. I will say that too. So it's actually twice as concentrated if you use like the horse paste or the ruminant conventional Safe-Guard products. So keep that in mind. And it also was designed to stay in water. So that's really what makes it different versus some of the others. So we want to administer that through the water. You always want to treat the whole flock too. I should make that, make an important point. Just treating one individual, for instance, if you saw that one bird, with worms in the droppings, they're all going to have been exposed to that because those eggs are in the droppings, and chicken's natural behavior to peck in the ground, they're going to pick those eggs back up. So yeah, Fenbendazole is the active in Safe-Guard, and so that's a great one. There are others. If we want to rotate, Levamisole is another one. You may find it as Levamed or Prohibit are the two trade names for that. It's also for poultry, but it's not specifically labeled for poultry, and you've got to buy a bigger packet of it. So it's water soluble as well. And then if you've got like a tapeworm issue, for example, Fenbendazole won't help you there, right? It's Praziquantel, or you have to use a really high dose of Fenbendazole, or albendazole is another one there too that you could use for that.
Okay. And somebody asked about egg withdrawal, and I know from using the Safe-Guard Aquasol that there's no egg withdrawal with that. Is that correct? Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah.
So 0 day egg withdrawal on the Safe-Guard product, and obviously the others, starting at between 7 and 14 days would be your withdrawal for any of those other products.
Okay. And is that my understanding is that just it's because those aren't really tested on chickens formally, so there's just a precaution to do the egg withdrawal because
Yeah, so FAIRAD, so food animal, it's basically a resistance database or a residue database that's provided by the government, and so they've done a bunch of studies on for drugs that aren't labeled for whatever the animals, food animals, and so you can look up many, not all, but you can look up many products on their drugs that can be used like in poultry and what the withdrawal time, the estimated withdrawal time should be. So, Ivermectin I think is one where people use commonly. That drug in particular is very what we call lipophilic, so it attaches to fat, right? And if we look at what an egg is, it's a big globule of fat essentially. And so like withdrawal times for ivermectin at a minimum are 8 weeks, and there's more data out there, more recent data to show that it's probably 12 to 14 is a better withdrawal time if you're wanting to avoid residues.
Okay. That's great. Okay, so somebody else asked a question. I forgot what it was. Oh, someone said I treated my 100-ish flock with the Safe-Guard Aquasol. A couple of birds still have dirty vent areas. So I know I talked about before on my page at one point, if you have chickens with dirty vents, it's probably a good idea to get, a fecal flow test done and then treat for any parasites they may have. So what would you say to this person who says, I treated them and they still have a dirty vent?
Right. That could be caused by a lot of different things, obviously parasites being one, but, just GI upset in general. If it's a free range flock, they could be eating something in particular that could be causing that GI upset. So that's a hard one to nail down. It's not pasty or, dirty butt is 100% equal or correlates with parasites. So keep that in mind too. And, one other thing to add to the deworming treatment is if you go off-label, like some of the other off-label products, obviously there is no withdrawal time there specifically. But there are other worms that if we increase the doses a little bit, which at this point now you are going off-label, so it would require a withdrawal, but like Fenbendazole, Safe-Guard, those larval stages are affected by a little higher dose. Capillaria is another worm that can cause a lot of damage to the GI tract with just very few numbers. Very, very difficult. You can hardly see it. But if you double the dose of Safe-Guard, it will help eliminate that too. So Personally, when I deworm, I use a little higher dose, like 2 or 3 times the dose. It's very safe, and I'm going to clean up more of those different larval stages and have a broader spectrum of activity on other worms.
Okay. And somebody said, if I actually see worms in the droppings, do I need to treat longer?
No. I mean, the product it's a dewormer, so if they're there, it will treat them. It actually works really well on the adults. It's as those larval stages are younger, it has less effect, and that goes for any of the dewormers. They work that way.
Okay, I'm seeing a lot of people. We can switch gears. Unless, do you have anything else about internal parasites that you want to talk about, as far as, I guess, as far as worms go?
Right. Well, keep in mind, we talked about the cecal worm. That's one that can carry. It's a worm. It doesn't really cause a lot of damage because if you're like chicken anatomy, really quick, this paired ceca, they're essentially like the appendix of what we have, except they're fully formed and functional. So what goes on there is fermentation of like non-digestible stuff. That's why
Okay.
those cecal excretions smell so bad. But that's where the cecal worm lives. Again, it doesn't cause a lot of damage. We don't really see issues directly related to the cecal worm. But that cecal worm can carry histaminiasis, which is, if you're familiar with blackhead disease, it's a really devastating disease in turkeys. So that's one that we really want to keep track of, especially if chickens and turkeys on the same property can be a harborer, right, of other bad bugs. And worms can carry salmonella. They can carry other diseases too. So again, there's more than one reason just to deworm, right? It's to keep our birds healthy and us
Yeah.
healthy.
Yeah. This is great info. I am in the same belief as you. Test your chickens often, treat if needed. And I do see a lot of people out there who recommend only treating when you see worms in the droppings. And like you said at the beginning of this, if you're just hopping in, the doctor talked about at the beginning, if you're waiting until you're seeing the worms in the droppings, you've waited too long and they're already causing damage for your chickens. So somebody else asked if you can find worms in the eggs, in chicken eggs.
Well, it's rare, but yes, you can find them in the egg. So what happens there is the cloaca, it's like Latin for common sewer, right? So everything comes together there, the reproductive tract, the GI tract, and the urinary tract. What happens is those worms can, as they migrate down, right? If you're finding them in the droppings, obviously they're in the cloaca at some point. So that worm, it's alive and it can move around and it actually goes back up into the reproductive tract. So it works its way up in basically to the shell gland and then it's incorporated into the egg. So in rare cases, you can break an egg open and find a roundworm inside of it. I actually have a picture on our presentation. I think I've shared it with you. It's interesting to check out.
So not fun to think about, cracking an egg and then finding a worm inside, which is something I like. I know it's rare. I've never seen it in any of my eggs, but I think like, gosh, I'm selling eggs. I'm giving eggs to family members. The last thing I want is for my grandma to find a worm in one of her eggs.
Right. Yeah. That's certainly a reason to deworm your chickens to avoid that possibility.
Yeah. Another question about worms popped up here. Someone said, I have so many slugs and earthworms. I can never get rid of parasites in my chickens. Can I get rid of the carriers of the worms? I feel like there are people who deal with even external parasites just more often than other people. Their property is just more prone to it. So, I mean, I don't know if you can get rid of slugs and earthworms. They're kind of,
No, that's one of the obstacles, or whatever you want to call them, backyard chickens, right? So not all parasites need, I guess this is a good opportunity to talk about the life cycle. When I mentioned life cycle, just to expand on it. So if we look at the roundworms, like the true roundworm, the cecal worm, they're a direct life cycle. So chickens pecking in the litter, picks up that egg. That means once that egg's ingested, 30 days later, it's matured and producing eggs again. So it happens very quickly. Once those eggs are in the environment, they can last for years. Well, months to years, let's put it that way, depending on what it is. But they're very, very hardy. That's the point. Then there are others like the tapeworm and some of the other roundworm species where they do rely on a arthropod vector, we call it, like a bug, a slug or a beetle or a fly. Tapeworm would be another one. Often if you've got a lot of tapeworms, flies tend to be the vector, so they'll pick up that egg, it develops inside of them, then the chicken or turkey picks up eats that fly and then starts the cycle all over again. So some of them require that bug vector, others don't. So unless you can, controlling your insects in your yard requires obviously chemicals or other things too. So we obviously want to avoid that as much as possible. And the most effective way is like leave them in an organic environment and then treat them for those worms when they get them.
Yeah. Somebody else asked, can you treat with the Safe-Guard Aquasol when your chickens are molting or around molting season? Because there is some information out there about, I'm pretty sure it's Safe-Guard, but I think it's the goat dewormer one that people have used in the past. Is it the one, am I thinking right? That's the one that hinders like feather growth.
I've seen those reports too. Like when I was really involved with that when it was brought to market, and I've never seen that in production. So there's no it's not known that causes an issue. So I'm not sure where that originated from, the effects on feather development. Maybe in like pigeons, I think, don't do well with, so that's one species you want to stay away from with Fenbendazole. Of course, it's not labeled for that either, but to my knowledge, I've never seen it happen where it's going to affect feather development in mold. Okay. So it's used all the time.
Yeah, and when I did an original testing here at my house with the Safe-Guard Aquasol, and I was talking to the company, that was one of my questions that I had asked them, and they said it was safe to use with your chickens while they're molting. The chicken version one, this one they were talking about. So
right, and they are the same. Just to clarify that too. So if you've got the goat product or the horse product or the cattle product, the active ingredient there is the same. It's just slightly different. In the Aquasol version, like I mentioned, it's just a finer particle. Really, it's a suspension. It's not like it's not like putting salt or sugar in water where it dissolves in. So it's just it'll settle out if you leave it long enough.
Okay. All right. So there have been a few people that have commented on their chickens missing feathers. I'm trying to remember all the comments that came through. Somebody talking about missing feathers around the tail area. Someone else is talking about depluming mites and how to treat them. She said when treating, I guess her name is Bridget, when treating depluming mites with ivermectin, how often should they be retreated? And since they don't regrow their feathers until they molt, how can I tell if the depluming mites are gone?
So here, like we mentioned, the fecal float would be an ideal like gold standard. You can have a skin scraping done, or if it's true depluming mites, you can actually take a feather, some of the injured feathers, because those mites are going to burrow into the base of that feather, like the quill of the feather, and you can look at it under a microscope with some oil, or your veterinary can do it and find those mites. It will take time for the feathers to regrow back. Usually you do see some pin feathers start to come in. It's not like they only grow feathers when they molt. They do, other feathers come in during the year, especially if they're bare. But yeah, treating the ivermectin, if we look at the life cycle again of the mite in this case, it's about 7 days. So those mites need to, depluming mites are always on the bird, so they don't really come off the bird. So if you can give that ivermectin, really don't need to typically go back and retreat. Again, I just reemphasize that particular drug has a really extended withdrawal time, and I know many of us share eggs too, right? So like you may be comfortable with the ivermectin, you don't care about it, but if you're baking cakes for the church sale or giving eggs away to the neighbors, we always have to remember we're not the only people eating the eggs, and some people have sensitivities to some of these drugs, and so being cognizant of that and food security, right? We want to make sure that we're providing eggs without any sort of residues in them.
Yeah. Henny's Roost asks, are there good resources on how to read a fecal float test? They said they never know what they're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, you can go online. So I can describe the fecal float a little bit, right? So it's either a really dense sugar or salt solution, typically. It's the easiest way to do it. And that solution is so dense that it causes the eggs to float. And so what you'll do is you'll take your fecal sample, mix it with that salt or sugar water, let it sit typically, and you can put it in a test tube, and you lay a microscope slide on top of like the meniscus that forms. If you fill that test tube all the way to the top, and there's a little bit of liquid coming over the top, and you set that slide down and let it sit for like 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes, and those eggs rise up slowly and they'll stick to that microscope slide. Then you turn it over, look it under a microscope, and you can see the eggs are from a size standpoint, obviously you can't visualize them with your eyes, but like a 10x or what would be 100 power on a microscope, they're easily seen if they're there. Now you have to do a few of these too, because you've got spores like pollen and stuff like that can look similar in a fecal sample. So you kind of got to do a few. You can look online for the eggs. They're pretty easy to spot them once you spot them.
Yeah, maybe we should do something where we do some fecal flow test examples for people and make a little.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I've never done it. I just let my vet do it. But
I've
willing to collect
actually,
some poop.
I used to have a little camera that fit into my microscope, and I could like record on the iPad. I need to get
Hmm.
another one of those, and it would be that's a great idea to show the folks how we do it. And it's actually a
Yeah.
pretty simple process. All you need is a microscope. That's
Yeah,
just it.
who wants to watch us look at poop? Let us know. Okay, chickcheck.us has said, what are some common GI issues that could be more bacterial related, maybe, or at least not obvious worms or coccidia? And would a vet recommend antibiotics for something like that?
Yeah, so I mean that's a pretty broad question too. There are definitely GI upsets like Clostridial diseases is one that comes to mind, or Clostridial bacterium. So basically, if we talk about those ceca again, if you've got so there's a great model where so coccidiosis, the chicken gets coccidiosis, damages that intestinal lining, that impairs absorption of nutrients. And so if you remember what I said about the ceca, and that it's just there to kind of ferment non-digestible stuff, right? So if there's an upset in the GI tract, or where nutrients are making its way all the way to the ceca, now we dump a bunch of gas kind of on that fire, where these bacteria, they're just hanging out. They can't grow really because there's not much there for them to eat. But if you dump protein in there, then all of a sudden their numbers start to exponentially increase. And when they're in that exponential growth phase, they produce an enterotoxin. So they actually produce a toxin that causes even more damage to the GI tract. And yes, in those cases, things like BMD, or an antibiotic that would just stay within the intestine is a good way to control those. So there are definitely bacterial and viral issues that can affect the gut.
Um, all right, so since we sort of mentioned coccidia, someone said, please talk about coccidiosis and the symptoms and how to treat it. It's one of
Yeah.
the more common things that if you're going to get chickens, you're probably going to deal with it, especially in the beginning, I think, when you're just getting used to like how to, keep things clean and what to look for.
Yeah, we could probably do a straight coccidiosis live one, but I'll touch on it just a little bit because it's not that it's complicated, but it is complex, right? So there's multiple different species of coccidia, and if we're raising what we call long life birds, which pretty much unless you're raising a broiler, then your focus on coccidia is a little different, like
Hmm.
broiler to eat versus our long lived like laying type hens that we have in the backyard. So all these different species, some affect at different times. Really, it's early on is when we want to start, when they're most affected because they have very little, if any, immunity, right? And so it's a parasite. It's actually in the same family as, so it's Eimeria, which is also like malaria. It's the same bug. Malaria affects the blood cells, and coccidiosis affects the enterocytes of the gut. So it actually attacks and grows inside the little cells that line the GI tract. So what happens in malaria doesn't work as well, but in chickens, they can develop immunity to this. If you look at coccidiosis vaccines, we give those at a day of age, and it's a controlled dose of an actual live cocci organism, multiple species within the vaccine. And so they get that controlled dose, and the parasite Eimeria starts to cycle. It takes about 5 to 7 days to complete that cycle. And then in that 7 days, it's excreting those oocysts back out. And natural chick behavior, in order for that vaccine to really to be effective, they need to pick that vaccine back up off the floor, which means that chick needs to be foraging in the litter and pick up manure droppings that have those same oocysts in it. And that cycle needs to happen 3 different times. So it takes about 21 to 28 days for the bird to really start to develop that immunity. If you come in with Corid, for example, and we shut down any of the coccidial cycling, then the chicken's immune system it kind of clears the slate really quickly, right? So it loses the memory, what we call, of Eimeria, of the cocci. And if you give that dose of Corid too high of a dose or too long of a dose, you can kind of wipe the slate clean, and then it actually sets you up for coccidiosis again later because you didn't manage it well. So always do the low dose of of Corid, which would be about 2 teaspoons per gallon.
Hmm.
And yeah, you don't want to do that for about 3 days, and that tamps down the level and still allows some of those to continue to cycle and immunity to continue to build.
Very good information. I saw something. Somebody asked if we trimmed our chickens' nails. It's kind of not on topic today. We are talking about parasites, internal and external, but I don't usually trim my chickens' nails in one of my flocks because they free range and they scratch around and they have plenty of things to do. My silkies are not so great at that, so they do get their nails trimmed. Okay, so we've talked about worms, we've talked about bacterial stuff, we've talked about coccidia. Let's move to external parasites, if you're good with that.
Yeah.
Somebody said, well, we'll start with this person's questions. My rooster had a horrible case of scaly leg mites. I treated him for a couple weeks. What's your best advice for treatment, and how do you know when it's truly gone?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So scaly leg mites, obviously you can't see those either. They burrow into the scales, which are like keratin. So if you think about the scales on the shanks of a chicken, it's sort of like your fingernails, except instead of them growing out like your fingernails, they actually grow up from the bed. And what happens is that mite gets in that basal layer, right kind of between where the keratin is forming and then the actual live cells. And they burrow through there and they cause damage and inflammation. And then obviously they're excreting waste too. All that causes that scale on the chicken shank to kind of lift up, right? In severe cases, even if you treat, one, it takes a while for that. It's like your fingernail. If you bust a fingernail, it could take months for it to finally, grow out and look somewhat normal. And if you damage that bed where the nail's growing from, you'll always have a little scar in your nail there that always shows up. Mm-hmm. Same thing in these chickens with scaly leg mites. If the infestation was severe and the damage was really bad, they may not grow back normally, and they will take months usually for them to heal. But scaly leg mites, Ivermectin is one. Again, talk about withdrawal issues there. That's a product that's on the market. You'll hear often people talk about petroleum jelly like Vaseline. That's one too. That can be mixed with wettable sulfur, which is another kind of organic way to control mites. We'll talk about that one here shortly, but that can be mixed together and actually gives you a little bit better activity because the sulfur will kill the mites themselves, plus the activity of the Vaseline where it suffocates them, right? The other one coming to market, which we don't have right now, is fluralaner. You probably heard me talk about it if you've been on the Poultry Doc, which will be Exzolt. So that's out, or will be out in the summer, and that's going to be a way, again, where one dose, which actually it's 2 doses, so it's day 0 and day 7, you give 2 doses 7 days apart. We've shown, like the tests haven't been done specifically on chickens, but if we look at like sarcoptic mange in dogs, it's a burrowing mite similar to the scaly leg mite, and it's almost 100% effective for that. Okay. So if we're talking about depluming mites or scaly leg mites, it'll be a really great tool for backyard chicken owners to use.
And that one is, that's a vet only, right? You have to get that from your vet. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So it's a prescription, or will be a prescription only. And, you'll have to get that through a vet or come to the poultrydoc.com and we've got subscription services there too. So that will be coming on probably more so in the summer, the subscriptions that are available for everybody.
Okay. Yeah, I never want my chickens to get mites, but I am excited to try because I did the founding feathers on your website. So then I got my little kit, my first aid kit that came, and that was in there. And I was like, oh, maybe we'll get mites this year. We can put it to the test.
We have, it's obviously I've got samples to send out, so it's been good to see. We've got people reporting back that, chickens with like depluming mites, had issues with it, and they're looking great now. So we're actually about to go back out and make a visit to see an improvement in one case. So stay tuned for that one.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad. It seems like now in like the time frame that we're in right now is the people. What was I trying to say? There's more going on in the chicken keeping sector. I feel like 10 years ago, it was like, just use the goat dewormer and just wing it. And there's no vets out there that are going to help you. But I'm seeing more and more, like in my area, just, when I was able to call a vet, it was like one person that every single person called if they needed something with chickens. And now there's probably about 3 or 4 that is like within driving distance of me. So it is nice to see that it's growing.
It's picking up, and that's definitely what we're trying to do at the Poultry Doc. I have 2 different meetings I went to over the January and spoke to different vets, a lot of vets, about the potential with this segment of the industry, really, that it's so overlooked, and a lot of them are scared to take them on as patients, one, because of the laws, the regulations, and what can be used in poultry safely. As a vet, we've got a license that we have to protect, right? And so
Mhm.
there's drugs out there that are illegal that have given, the vet would risk losing their license. So a lot of them just stay away for that. So we're trying to educate and, inform them on the need of people, and they've got a great response so far. Everybody's been really positive about it.
That's awesome. Somebody had commented, said she had to hop off, but she was going to come back and watch for the answer. But is there a place that they can send fecal float tests? I know there was a website, and the one that I used to suggest, and now I don't think they do it anymore, from what I understand. So is there a place somebody can go? Like, can they go to the poultry doc and request a fecal test and send it away?
Yeah, so you can't go on the site right now and buy that. We're in the middle of a big rebuild with the site, and there's a lot of things changing. The founding feather, as you know, comes with a fecal bag, so I am doing those, but at a relatively limited availability, I would say it right now.
Hmm.
But your local vet, and I know they're probably resistant to it, but again, it's the same process that they would use for dogs or cats. So as long as you can kind of convince them that, hey, just look at, if you notice the same egg like that's in a dog or cat fecal, it's going to look basically the same. If that's not an option, then there's several state labs, so you can always look at those folks. It's in the southeast where there's a lot of poultry. Obviously, there's dedicated poultry-specific state labs. Those are nice because they tend to subsidize those tests. You may not have to pay what you would at your local clinic that can do it cheaper. And then all states are going to have like a state diagnostic lab, so somebody should be able to put you in touch with some facility that can run a fecal for you.
Okay, so someone said, I want to sign up for Founding Feathers program, but I live in Canada and some of the meds aren't available here. Would you suggest that they do that with you? Are you able to hook them up with meds in Canada?
We have founding feathers in Canada, so
Okay,
yeah,
great.
we don't discriminate to our Canadian friends.
um, all right, let's see. I love the idea of Poultry Doc. Is it online? People are asking. So let's just talk real quick. So
Yeah.
if you're new here, the Poultry Doc and I go live every month for these medical-based chats where we get some real answers from a veterinarian who's very experienced in poultry. And so we're calling it Purely Vetted. Topics are different every month. So make sure you're following both of us so you can find the live when we go live. We were trying to do it on the first of the month. This month was a little bit different because he had what was it, a seminar or something
Yeah,
to be at.
speaking at a Missouri Veterinary Medical Association meeting, got hung up, and I was in an airport in Chicago on the first, stuck in traffic stuff. But anyway, we're here today, so
Yeah, we're here. We're getting it done. So explain to people what you're doing real quick, just so they know.
yeah. So if you haven't been, thepoultrydoc.com, that's our website right now. Again, we're totally remodeling everything, and there's new stuff coming. So look there. We've got articles and videos and some audio content where we're doing like some AI generated podcasts that are really cool. You can check those out. But the platform is to provide telemedicine services for backyard owners, right? With veterinary medicine, it depends where you're at, what state you're in, because the regulations change state by state. Some states will have more access than others. But part of what we're building too is a network of veterinarians all over, right, all over the U.S., where we can facilitate some of these services through those clinics. So if you've got a veterinarian that may be interested or just may not be, but that you work with, send them your information, their information, and we'd be happy to reach out to them and try to work with them, because that's another service we're providing, is for veterinarians to see your poultry, right? So that they can use our tools to help facilitate that service. So yeah, just check out thepoultrydoc.com. You'll find our founding feather information there and a way to purchase that. And again, that's a white glove sort of service that comes with a couple hours of consulting time with me or another veterinarian on the staff. Over the course of the year, you get the founding feather box that you just mentioned, our chicken care kit. So there's some first aid stuff in there and stuff to treat mites and worms and whatnot. So yeah, it's really, you have access to me and send emails, or something, there's an emergency, give me a call.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just so you guys know, like, this is not a branded thing. This is not like he's not paying me to say anything. I just really think this is really cool, and I thought, hey, like, let's bring this to my followers so they can see what's happening, because really, I mean, I feel like my followers really do, like, they're like, I will take my chicken to a vet if I need to, like, tell me what to do. And there's just not as much, there's not as many resources out there. So this is really, really helpful.
Yeah.
I love this.
I started it to improve access, right? Because if you go
Mm.
on these forums, there's just so much misinformation out there, and it's been repeated and repeated and repeated and it's false, and sometimes it's injures the welfare of our birds. So I'm trying to correct that. But one other thing to mention too. So right now, the Founding Feather is really the only subscription model that we have. There are others coming that will be more affordable. So just stay in tune. Sign your email up on the site, and we'll reach back out as things progress on our end.
Yeah, and this is like beginning stages. So, make sure you're following the Poultry Doc so you can stay up to date and see as things progress. I see somebody keeps asking, what about Elector PSP? Like they keep saying it. So I've been trying to get there because, we haven't talked about mites and lice and things like that yet. So we can move on to that if you'd like.
Sure, yeah. So, Elector PSP, again, another great one is labeled for poultry. That's always, as a vet approach, we always want to stick to products that are labeled, right? That's, if you can ever use a labeled product first, that's where you go.
Mm-hmm.
So Elector PSP is a spinosad. You apply it to the birds, to the environment as well, and it does a great job. Permethrin is another one. Spinosids and permethrins have been around for a long time, so we do start to see some resistance with those. They've been around for decades. Always, I hear a lot of people about totally cleaning the coop out, down to everything. It's just a major task, right? If we remember taking into account the life cycle of these parasites, and we can split them up into two different ones. You have the parasites that live, and we're talking about ectoparasites now, but the ectoparasites that live off the bird and those that live completely their whole life cycle on the bird. So think northern fowl mite, the depluming mite, the scaly leg mite. The northern fowl mite may jump on and off, but that mite has to be on the bird in order to feed and complete its life cycle. Same thing, the depluming mite, scaly mite, those obviously don't come off. Now, look at the other ones like the red mite or bed bugs, which is another icky one. Those spend most of their time off the bird. So they just go feed on the bird at night, actually. And so you can look in your coop at night and you may see restless birds moving around like they're agitated at night. It's a good chance there may be a mite issue going on. My point being with that is Elector PSP, if we look at the life cycle of the worm, if it's a northern fowl mite issue, you really just need to apply it to the environment, to the birds over the course of like 2 treatments over, say, 7 to 10 days apart. And again, that those mites have to be on the bird to feed. They're going to be exposed to that product. So the need to really like completely clean everything out is probably not necessary if we just look at the mite. In colder months, I will say too, though, keep in mind, like those mites that live off the bird, so think northern fowl mite and bed bugs, they slow down. So like they don't read the book per se. Like their life cycle actually kind of extends when it's colder. So we may not get the effect that you may have to treat 2 or 3 or 4 times just because they don't come back to the bird as often as they would normally in warmer months. So that may be an option too, where if you're going to treat, obviously if there's a severe problem, treat it then. If not, it's probably better to wait till it warms up a little bit, like coming into the spring now.
Yeah, yeah. No chicken wants to be all wet right now.
Yeah.
Not here. We're going in the negatives today.
Yeah, it's sunny and like 70 here, so
it's pretty cold. Okay,
I will
so
say that too. That's a good point, Nikki. Is that those products? Obviously, they're spray products, and you're going to have to wet the bird to some degree.
mm-hmm.
You don't need to give a bird a bath in Elector PSP. Right? That's not necessary. The directions are on the label. Follow the directions. Mm-hmm. They don't say anything about giving a bath. But obviously, we're going to wet birds to some degree if we give that product. So again, always keep that in mind in the wintertime. We probably don't want to be wetting birds, especially if it's going to be really cold. This is another, it sounds too salesy, but with the Elector PSP, with Exzolt, it goes through the water, right? So they just drink it and you treat that way. So there's no getting birds wet.
Yeah. So if you have access to that, that's a better, safer option. Okay, let's see. You had a vet talk on here, small animal vet here with an expanding interest in backyard poultry. Would love to learn more of the basics. Would that person email you, message you on here?
They can message me here. Probably the best is anybody who's got questions, send an email to info at the Poultry Doc and thepoultrydoc.com. And we'll follow up with you for sure. Happy to work with clinics. And we'll actually have part of the newer features coming to the site are CE, right? So there'll be a specific veterinary login, and vets will have certain resources available to them that most users won't, because we're trying to gate stuff to where obviously you probably don't want to see necropsy, PowerPoints with all kinds of lesions and stuff like that. Vets find that stuff interesting. I think most people probably wouldn't, but there'll be great stuff coming for vets specifically.
Yeah. Okay, someone said, would it be wise if you're using the Elector PSP or Fraxel, one of those, would it be wise to spray the chickens as a preventative? Like, would you be like, once a month, I'm going to spray my chickens down just so they don't get mites? Or would you just save it for when they actually get them?
Yeah, I think this is one where it's relatively easy to see those. If you've got a challenge, northern fowl mites, they leave the residue. It's like their feces and shed exoskeletons. So you'll see that kind of coffee ground, gray looking stuff along the skin. Obviously with lice and those other parasites, you can see the nits relatively easily. So for me personally, like the northern fowl mites, I just feel them. Like way before I even see them, I'll pick a bird up. We'll go work up a case. That's one thing too with PoultryDoc.com. We're on our Facebook and YouTube. We do a case about every week, so we'll go out in the field and work up cases. And we've done a few that where we've encountered parasites. It wasn't the primary thing we were there for, but Rachel and I are leaving, and I'm like, God, I feel something crawling all over me. So they had mites and didn't know about it. So go back and leave them some Exzolt and say, take care of these.
Yeah, it is surprising when you end up holding a chicken and then you're like, what are these little tiny black things crawling all over my arms? Someone said, is that the same thing? Is Elector PSP and Aquasol the same thing? So no, they're not. Elector PSP is just one medication you can use for external parasites. Aquasol, Safe-Guard Aquasol is an internal parasite dewormer. Let's see. Should you use the same stuff for lice? Will the Exzolt? So he's talking about another one now. It's called Exzolt, and that also goes in the water, but that one is for mites. Is it also used for lice?
It's labeled for northern fowl mites, so I always have to say that, right? But anything that's going to take a blood meal, so if it's lice or the bed bug or the red mite, northern fowl mite, all those are going to be taking blood meals or some way feeding off tissues of the bird. So think the scaly leg mite, they're not actually feeding off blood, but they're feeding off the sebaceous material that comes out as they burrow through, right? So they're exposed to it. So anything that is feeding on the bird, Exzolt will be a good option for you, really. Again, because it also has 0-day egg withdrawal, which I didn't mention earlier.
Okay, awesome. Someone said they would love to hear more about the Vaseline and sulfur. So have you done that? Do you mix it together? Do you just go buy? I actually have never used sulfur. So do you just go buy like a powdered sulfur? How do you do that?
There's a brand called, I think it's Yellow Jacket. So I think you have to buy like a 20-pound bag or 50-pound bag. It's not like a small, they're going to waste a lot, right? Or it's going to sit around for a long time because you don't need that much. But what you can do with it is put it in a dust bath. Commercially, it wouldn't be unusual. They would take bags and just open them up in the floor, and the birds just come dusting in them. And that sulfur powder turns to, basically, it forms kind of acid, I think is how it works, and it kills the parasites. So it does a really good job. If you mix that with Vaseline, again, it keeps the sulfur on the legs. So that's one way to do it. The Vaseline in itself too will choke the birds out, so they won't be able to breathe.
Not the birds, the mites.
Not the birds, the mites. Sorry.
That'll choke your birds out. Well, I guess if you had them eaten. Somebody say, can you spell Exzolt? You want to spell that for people, and then someone can type it out.
Sure, Exzolt. So
there you go.
And that one's been available in Europe for a while now. So it's been approved here in the U.S. They're waiting for the actual backyard version, which is a small. I think it's going to be a 4 ml bottle of it. Probably should look for it in June, July. Last I heard, anyway.
And that one is a vet. You have to get that from the vet or from the poultry doc. You can't just go buy that. Like the Safe-Guard Aquasol is available. It's at my Tractor Supply. You have to have it unlocked. They have it behind a case, but you can buy it there. And that's for internal. External stuff you have to get for. And somebody asked, will the Exzolt work for depluming mites, do you think?
Yeah, it should work for that. Again, not on the label, but if we look at the data about, I mentioned sarcoptic mange with mange in dogs, it's almost 100% effective against treating that. If we look at how both of those mites are similar in that they burrow through the skin, we expect it to happen. And we've already seen positive results. It's been available in Australia too, so that's another place you can go to look for cases and how it's been used and some of the positive results that it's happened or done there.
Okay, awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to cover? We're at the 45-minute mark right now, and I don't want to leave anything out that you were like dying to say.
No, I mean, I think we covered it all. I can't believe 45 minutes went up this fast.
I know.
I think tapeworms was one we didn't mention. Again, Aquasol is not going to have really much of an effect on tapeworms. We didn't mention that. Praziquantel would be one for that. Albendazole does have an effect on tapeworms as well. There's a toxicity there with waterfowl, so be careful about using that. At a higher dose, it can be toxic. So, it's a good reason not to be, willy-nilly about how you use these things, because they don't all act the same way in all species. So always be careful, always read and follow the label. Use the data.
And do you think, being as involved as you are in all this, do you think there'll be another medication that can be used for other types of internal parasites for chickens, or do you think take what we have for now?
Yeah, I would, so these companies are realizing that this is a huge market. And I mean, obviously it's a money thing, right? There has to be a financial reason for them to do it. It costs millions of dollars to bring a product from development, even if it's already exists, safety studies have to be done,
Right.
stability studies have to be done. That takes years for all that to happen. And obviously it's not cheap. So they are becoming aware that, hey, there's a potential for a market here. Let's maybe bring some products to them. Merck has really responded that way with Safe-Guard and now Exzolt. So I think there'll be others coming, but I don't see any in the pipeline right now. Let's put it that way. So they're not going to be near term outside of Exzolt, which is coming out this summer.
Yeah. And one person, her name is Snow Monster. That sounds like what's out my window right now. Has asked a few times about how common is it for chickens to get mites and internal parasites, worms. And I'll just say from my experience, I feel like all my friends that have chickens, and myself included, have had lice or mites at some time or another. Some people have had it multiple times with their chickens, and definitely check if you have any issues with your chickens. If they're acting kind of depressed, if they're scratching a lot, if you notice them not wanting to sleep in their coop, if their feathers don't look that great, go dig in their feathers and look on their skin. Go in there at night with a flashlight if you can't find them during the day, and just double check. And as far as internal parasites go, I kind of do, the fecal flow test. I treat if I need to. And I've not seen worms in my chicken's poop. But when I've had like rescue hens and stuff, I have seen it already in their droppings. So you tell us, how often do you think if you get chickens, you're going to be dealing with these things at some time or another?
Yeah. So if we break it up again, the intestinal parasites are really specific to chickens or turkeys or whatever you have. Like the turkey roundworm doesn't affect the chicken and vice versa. So I don't worry as much about like wildlife bringing those in. Usually they come in on birds that we bring in our flock, right? So just think about it. Even when that baby chick hatches, he is exposed to the egg shells, right? Just a few oocysts or a few worm eggs can still be on the outside of that shell, and they can be exposed that way. So it happens really early. Now the mites and the lice, those can be transmitted from wild birds. So most of our flocks are exposed to those birds too. So it's hard to keep them away from them. They've got the arthropod vectors that we talked about earlier. The grasshoppers and the beetles and the slugs in the backyard. So that increases exposure. So definitely backyard flocks are at a much higher risk than others in terms of getting and being exposed to these parasites.
Yeah. And I think about like my pets in the house. My dogs are living in the house. They go outside, during the day or whatever. And my vet every year is testing to make sure there's nothing going on. Even if I'm not seeing it, they still could be there. And the chickens are living outside, and they're digging in the dirt, and they're eating bugs and everything else all day, every day. So, chances are you're going to see it at some time. So it's best to know what to look for and to keep on top of it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people too look at it as like this, my environment's terrible, or somebody blames somebody, oh, you got mites, you got a terrible place. That's not true. They can come and they can be in the most nice coops that you've ever found. Nikki, you've had them too, so it happens, right? It's not a bad thing. It's just we just have to maintain control of it.
Yeah. And then the one last question, then I'll let you hop off here and go enjoy the Super Bowl here soon. Somebody said, do they build a resistance to the Aquasol and medications that you've talked about?
Right. So do the chickens or the parasites? So the parasites with any drug, right? If it's a antibiotic, or in this case, an antiparasitic, yes, over time, resistance can build up, and this is why we want to use that targeted treatment. We only want to treat when we really need to, or based on the life cycle of the worm if we don't have that information. Fenbendazole has been on the market for a while in poultry. I'll use turkeys as an example. For over 20 years, it's been used in turkeys because the turkeys, they can put it in the feed, and we really don't see resistance to it. So, yes, it's possible. But if we use it correctly and if we rotate products, that's another way to lower the likelihood of developing resistance. So this is, again, why it's important to seek veterinary advice when we go to use antibiotics. Using the right one for the right thing, the right dose, that all helps to keep those drugs lasting longer, right? We don't want to abuse them.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you are here on the live and you're watching the replay, make sure you're following the Poultry Doc and I go live every month, and we do a different topic. And a lot of people are asking if I could put those medications in my stories there, or they want to know if I could just list them for them. Do you want to maybe pop them in your stories today, and then I'll share them to mine so they can see like common drug? Maybe not today. Maybe you can enjoy the Super Bowl. Maybe do it tomorrow, but
yeah,
sometime soon.
And then, check out the poultrydoc.com too in our articles. I'll probably put something up there. I'll have Rachel or somebody put it up on Instagram and give that. I try not to give like specific. I will give doses for that one. I'll just list what's on the label. That's kind of, again, you've got a license to protect, so I've got to make sure the information is legal and whatnot. But we'll get happy to share that information. If you got questions, the info@thepoultrydoc.com. Send questions there, or hit us up on the Facebook page too.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Well, yeah, you're not going to list the dosage for everybody's flock.
yeah. There's a lot of different, variables in there too. So.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next month. We don't have our topic yet, so maybe I'll put up a thing in my stories today, and you guys can suggest the next topic.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining. Looking forward to the next time, and thanks, Nikki.
Yep. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.